Hello, thank you for joining. We're just going to give a couple minutes for people to enter the webinar. Apologies for running a couple minutes late. Just wait a few more moments for people to join, and then I'll kick us off with some housekeeping items. Okay, so thank you so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Caty Hirst. I'm the Director of Programming for Africa Oil and Power. We're very excited about this webinar brought to you by the African Energy Chamber and by Africa Oil and Power, taking advantage of opportunities in Uganda's oil and gas sector. I am going to explain just a few housekeeping items before we really kick off the panel today. So for everybody in our audience, I'm just going to explain some of these features. So if you look down at the the bottom bar of your Zoom app, you'll see a chat box. And in that chat box, feel free to engage in some conversations with your fellow audience members. We'll have an AOP kind of moderator in that box, making sure that everything's running smoothly. And then you'll also see a Q&A box. Use that Q&A box if you have a question for the panelists. I'll be reading those questions as we go through the conversation, and I'll be interjecting with some questions from the audience throughout the conversation. So try to keep the chat box for communicating and engaging with each other, and the question box for submitting your questions for the panelists. And next, if you are a member of the media and you would like to ask a question at the end of the webinar, please send a message in that chat box, and one of our team members will get back to you to set up when you're asking that question. We are also going to send a link in the chat box that has some information from the African Energy Chamber and some contact information if you have any other questions for the chamber. So be on the lookout for that link to show up in the chat box in just a minute. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth Rogo, who's the president for East Africa for the African Energy Chamber, and my co-moderator for today. Liz is going to introduce the panelists and get our conversation started. Liz, off to you.
Thank you very much, Katy. Hello, everybody. It would be very nice to know where you're all calling in from. So kindly just go to the chat and let me know, or let us know from which country you're calling. And welcome to this webinar on Uganda, looking at the opportunities. We're very, very excited. We have a wonderful group of panelists, and I know that we could be here all night, but we'll make sure that we keep a good time. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the panelists, and I think we have everybody on board. I will start with the Honorable Dr. Elly Karuhanga. This is a very good friend of mine when I used to work in Kampala. Dr. Elly, welcome. I know you have a lot to tell our participants about the opportunities in Uganda, and we all look very forward to listening to you. So Dr. Elly Karuhanga is the chairman of the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum. He's also the founding partner of the Kampala Associated Advocates, and the founding, as well as the founding chairman, as I said, of the chamber, and also the founder, President and Chairman Governing Council of Uganda Center for Arbitration, and there's a whole list of other things that Dr. Elly is involved in, and we have uploaded his bio so you can all have a look at that later. The next person I'd like to introduce to our panel is Mr. Brian Muriuki. Mr. Brian Muriuki is the Managing Director and Country Chair for Royal Dutch Shell in Ghana. He was previously the country chair for Shell in Kenya and has just recently moved to Ghana. So we congratulate you, Brian, on your new. And we look forward to listening to your input, because you're a man who has worked in the private sector. You've also worked in the government. You worked in the government, the Petroleum, Ministry of Petroleum in Kenya. So you have, I think, a very unique perspective that you can bring to this discussion. The next participant or panelist that we have is Mr. Gilbert Kamuntu. I hear he's the king of the Acholis. Welcome, Mr. Kamuntu. Mr. Kamuntu is the Chief Commercial Officer for the Uganda National Oil Company, and he has been in the oil industry for 15 years. Again, has spent time at Shell, so this is somebody who comes to us with a lot of experience in the oil and gas, and we look forward to hearing what exactly UNOC is doing and how UNOC can work and help those of us who are entrepreneurs who'd like to come into Uganda. And last but not least, one of our favorite sons of Africa, Mr. Ayuk. Mr. Ayuk is very well known. He's a passionate believer in what Africans can do, especially in the energy business. He comes with a distinguished law background. He's the founding and CEO of the Pan-African Corporate Law conglomerate, the Centurion Law Group. He's founder and executive chairman of the African Energy Chamber, as well as a best-selling author of a couple of books, the latest being Billions at Play. So we welcome all of you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending. And I know our audience will be thrilled to hear what you have to say. So we'll move on to the question. So basically, we know that Total has acquired Tullow's oil stake in the Tilenga project, and therefore the Uganda's oil and gas aspirations are moving ahead, and this puts the country back on track to target the long-awaited FID, in other words, the final investment decision. There's also work on the $3.5 billion East Africa crude pipeline project that this is also going along, and this is inching Uganda closer to first oil. The transaction signals a big shift in East Africa's oil and gas sector, as both Ugandans and East Africans as a whole will benefit from getting the Tilenga project off the ground. So, Honorable Elly, I'd like to ask you, how do you see the Total's acquisition of Tullow Oil stake in the Tilenga project impacting Uganda's oil and gas sector?
Elizabeth, I think this acquisition brings a lot of hope in the journey, in the long, long journey that we have had since the discovery of oil in 2006-07 in Uganda. We have learned a lot about oil and its ups and downs, how to negotiate for those contracts, how difficult it is. We've learned our lessons. The politicians have learned their lessons. The government has learned its lessons. The oil companies have learned their lessons in how to work with the interior in Africa. And so this decision by Total coming as it's done at a time like this, when the oil prices are completely depressed, almost embarrassing levels, when their share prices of every company in the oil and gas sector has fallen from the roof, it is amazing that Total could make a decision like invest more than $500 million into the Albertine graben at a time like this. Gives a big vote of thanks and hope to our industry in Uganda, gives us Ugandans hope that we have such a triple A performer in the oil and gas sector, having so much confidence in our governance, in our government, and in our resources. So we are excited. We are seeing a fantastic end of the journey towards FID. What is remaining are just simple administrative issues to be handled by the government. Total is done its work. I think they are waiting for only 1 month, end of this month, for UNOC to make a decision whether they will exercise their preemption right as contained in their joint venture agreement. So if that happens, then we people here in Uganda are looking towards seeing fast oil out of Tereng and Kingfisher, the upstream. Excellent. So we are very excited by that decision.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Elly. Gilbert, I want to ask you: do you see any, if there's if the CNOC, if CNOC decides to take their preemptive rights, do you see that delaying the closure of this sale, or will we just continue as is?
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth, and thank you for that introduction. So to go direct to your question, and maybe before that, just to say that I completely agree with what Dr. Elly has said, that this is a big push and a much needed momentum towards a final investment decision, and therefore first oil. So direct to your question is that, well, preemption rights, as most people know, are quite, I wouldn't say automatic, but well known in joint operating agreements. So at this point in time, we don't expect any specific delays. If CNOC decides to preempt, there's a well understood process or procedure it has to follow to back in and do some innovation. So no, the direct answer is no, we do not see any delays. If it decides to decline any preemption, well, the transaction would conclude in the current structure. So right now, sitting where we are, we can see this going ahead fairly smoothly.
Oh, that's good to know. But let me just throw a little spanner into this, and NJ, if I can get your opinion with this COVID, that's the COVID environment that we're in. Do you see this affecting this sale? Do you see this affecting when we think FID will be complete?
No, I don't. I think Elly hit it by the hit the nail correctly. And by the way, Elly is my professor, my friend, my brother. I was getting worried that he might not join, but I probably would have to call him and flog him a little bit if he doesn't come. So it's always a pleasure. But I think though that Gilbert is right. It would be something extraordinary to see CNOC raise preemption rights on this. If that was going to happen, they would, on these kind of issues, they always already negotiated. This specific agreement has had so much drama already that I don't think more drama is welcome. But I think in the era of COVID-19, you can never put anything off the table. What all of us industry players are kind of hoping for, that this should happen. It will happen. And we must also give credit to the government for doing their best to take out a lot of uncertainty out of this, because people want to, the industry want to really know that this is going to happen, and it would happen, because we should not look, we should not, as Elly said, since 2006 discovery, we should not, as much as we celebrate, we have to also know that Uganda is late. People like Elly who have really worked on this with their blood and soul understand that Uganda is late. 2006, you had this discovery. At the same time, you had this same discovery in on the Jubilee fields around 2007. And 2010, you saw first oil in Ghana. And 2020, we're talking oil and COVID. So we hope that Uganda is not going to delay this. The parties would not delay this. We can hash out real issues and not prevent the market from working and getting stuck in a paralysis of analysis. Again, the industry doesn't like paralysis of analysis. So I hope, like Gilbert and Elly, that we are not going to see any stumbling blocks. But for we lawyers, we love the drama because we get to make some more money.
So Brian, we definitely have a few areas that we need to look at when we just talk about the Tilenga project. There's the project, we also have the refinery, we have the East Africa crude oil pipeline. So basically in line with what the question that I've just asked your previous distinguished speakers, what is your take in terms of the delay? Because we're not just looking at going to drill holes. As I said, we've got other issues that we have to look at.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. So I think I fully agree with what the other gentlemen have said. This is an adrenaline shot in the arm of Uganda, but also across East Africa. Given the capital constrained world that we are in today, you've seen all of the majors and indeed the mid-sized and smaller caps reducing their capital expenditure budgets. But what you have here is a major with the financial muscle to make long-term investment decisions. And so, I mean, clearly we saw the financial malaise that Tullow had, but with Total coming in and even if UNOC preempts, those are, you know, majors that are able to inject capital into this project. When you think about COVID, you know, I think that does not take away from an FID decision. I think the bigger challenge is around project execution post the FID decision, yeah, where, you know, in terms of being able to mobilize workforce and labor, depending on how long COVID goes on or how we can contain it, that might be a challenge that needs to be looked at. But the FID decision itself, I don't think is something that would be delayed by COVID, but it would be the project execution and the timelines and the critical path for the project based on the ability to mobilize people. Yeah. But I think indeed this is good. Also given that, as NJ mentioned, if you look at Ghana and Jubilee and the time to first oil, I think in East Africa we have struggled a little bit with getting projects over the line to FID. Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda. So this really is an adrenaline shot, and it also, you know, puts the impetus squarely on the other countries in the region to try and also get their projects going.
Excellent. We're actually getting questions coming in, and we want to make this very interactive. So I have Katy. Katy, I think we've got a question from Robert Salmon that kind of fits into what we're discussing right now.
We do, yeah. So Robert asks, dear panelists, with FID coming along, will there be any change in planning and construction of the pipeline from Hoima to Tanga?
So who would like to answer that? Dr. Elly?
Can you ask again the question?
I can, yes. With FID coming along, will there be any change in planning and construction of the pipeline from Hoima to Tanga?
No, I don't think so. If anything, I think it will enhance the business.
Okay,
Yeah.
Gilbert, what's your take on that?
So just to support that, looking at that question from a technical perspective, a lot of work has been done on the East Africa crude oil pipeline. The FEED, which is the front-end engineering design, is complete. The ESIA's environmental, social, and impact assessments in Uganda and in Tanzania have been complete and approved. The pipeline route is well known. The land acquisition process is understood, well established. The Met-Ocean studies have been done. So a lot of technical work. The project is technically mature. What is remaining is the suite of commercial agreements that will surround this particular project. So the answer to that question is no. There will be no change to the pipeline route. All we will do is we will get to the stage that we talked about, which is a final investment decision, and then execute, which is the construction of the pipeline along that route.
So if I may ask, and it was something I brought up about the refinery, know that there's a 60,000 barrel a day refinery that's in the works, and nobody really talks much about it. ECOP tends to be the one that everyone's looking at. We have another question again from Robert Salmon. I think that really fits in with what I'd like to ask. Katy?
Sure.
Rob, how are you, Rob? Rob is my friend.
All our friends.
Yes. Small world.
Oh my goodness. Well, I need to meet Robert so he can be my friend too. Regarding the refinery near Hoima, please confirm.
So what does Robert want? I got carried away when I heard his name. What does he want?
So, Katy,
Okay, here's the question. Regarding
Yes.
the refinery near Hoima, please confirm that FID for the development project will include or not the refinery, and what will be the initial capacity of the refinery?
Sure.
I think the initial capacity might go to 30,000 barrels initially, but the whole thing is supposed to be 60,000. And I think the Saipem, the Italian company, which is, I think, an arm of ENI, in charge of the consortium and preparing all the feed for the refinery. A lot of work is actually going on right now. As you know, this project is supposed to happen almost at the same time. The pipeline, the refinery, the development and production at Tereng and Kingfisher, all these are supposed to be taking place in tandem. And so there is quite a lot of work going on the refinery. It's like quiet, but it's because they are working on the technical aspects of feed, the front-end engineering design of that project. And from what I hear, it's going very well. The fact that Total has made a decision on the upstream is, and of course on the pipeline, it follows that now the investors in the refinery now know that there's going to be oil. So they are going to be having the confidence that is required. Before that, without feed, they really were acting technically, but I think as investors in the refinery, they must have been worried about what will happen. So this has taken away this cloud that has been hanging over our project, and all the people who are involved in this project in all aspects, and including the service providers, are now sharpening their pencils and picking up the files which were gathering dust in the pigeonholes and looking at the Uganda project. There are not many projects now going on, as you know. Oil is stuck on the high seas, the tanks are full. And so most of the service providers have got all the equipment locked up in warehouses and in yards, and they are looking for work. So Rob, say bye-bye to your beautiful daughters and start think about coming back to Uganda.
So for those who don't know, Robert Salmon was head of Halliburton for East Africa and is very well known and loved. So just to demystify one thing, I know we have questions coming up and we'll make sure that we answer all of them. Brian, this whole refinery, before, I would say about a year ago, if I may say so, Our Excellency, or rather, Mr. Benny, Our Excellency, the refinery is a very close project to his heart, a dear close project to his heart. Does this refinery project have to go in order for the Tilenga project to go, or will that be treated separately? Do you know?
Yeah, I think, and for me, maybe I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate here. And disclaimer is we've had very many conversations with Gilbert around the issue of refining. So, you know, refining is a numbers game. And I think when you think about refineries, the considerations are around the economies of scale, whether you can actually make it profitable and economic. And, you know, conventional wisdom suggests that actually you need a large output to make it economic, given that this particular refinery will be competing on a netback basis with the refined products coming into the OTS system in Mombasa and the tolls to get them across into the region. So there's always a debate around kind of small refinery work, given that you've got a 2 million barrel a day facility in Jamnagar that is less than a day's steam away that brings refined products into East Africa. I think if the value proposition and the economics work for that small refinery and it's able to compete on a netback basis, then, you know, I'm pretty sure that they're sharpening their pencils, as Elly says, to really look hard at it for the obvious benefits of being able to be, for Uganda to be less reliant on the OTS system, coming in on the transportation logistics of that, but also to provide access for white products across the region. If you look at Rwanda, Burundi, and the eastern part of Congo. But it really is a numbers game. And, you know, I think from an upstream decision perspective, oil will flow in the eco pipeline. The refining is not the cake, but I think it's a nice, nice sweetener on the top of the cake if the numbers can be made to work. Yeah, and I know we've had some robust conversations with Gilbert on this.
Elizabeth, before Mr. Kamuntu comes in, I wanted to make a rebuttal on what Brian has said. You know, initially, as you know, I used to be president of Tullow, so our main thrust was to actually fight the refinery and just get the pipeline going. And that's what the oil companies really, really wanted. But the government insisted, and it delayed the project until everybody got tired of the discussions, and they just decided to throw in this refinery. But do you know that at the end of the day, supposing COVID goes on like this, and the oil prices continue to be depressed for such a long time, and if FID has been sorted, and the refinery is in production, it might be the real insurance of this project, because there's quite substantial market in this region, and the white products from that refinery might be a real strategic savior of our region, so that we start producing oil for the region and for ourselves. And so you might find that the refinery might not actually be an icing on the cake. It might be a fundamental player in the future of this development.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to shift our topic a little bit. I want to move on more to national content as well as service companies, because that seems to be the rage right now in our Q&A. So, NJ, I'd like to ask you this. What opportunities do you see for the domestic companies emanating from the Tilenga project? What opportunities do you see for domestic, so basically, sorry, it's a repeat. What opportunities do you see for domestic companies from Uganda as well as maybe from East Africa?
I think this is a good time for especially domestic and regional companies to really play. I think when we get caught up with big projects like these, we are looking at the Halliburtons of the world and the Baker Hughes, and that's very good. But the real economic impact here is going to be, what are those local companies? How are they preparing themselves and when skills are not there, what kind of joint ventures are you putting in place? And it's something that come from a very strong perspective where we say, we move away from what we call FATE, F-A-T-E. We got to move away from agents to entrepreneurs and look at those skills that are available locally, try to ring fence some of the things with regards to local content, trying to empower, especially domestic companies where the skills are not there, really trying to build on joint ventures and have that go for a longer while. But we got to also be a little careful with the cost implications of things, as it might be a little bit costly when you have that. But with dealing with COVID-19 right now, an economy that has taken a beating in the entire region, and not just the entire region, the entire continent and worldwide, as you look at it, projects like these might not save the economy, but they can also act as an enabler to really see some kind of growth. It's an enabler for training. It's an enabler to really get locals working again, and also them understanding all facets of these pipeline projects, and also provide a platform for transfer of technology. We should not miss that, but also we should not get stuck by it. And keep saying, if we don't have these local content parameters, the projects wouldn't go through. We should quickly negotiate local content parameters for the project and ensure that it's done locally, because I think people would really, really get hurt and feel left out if they pay attention to local content. But also, let's not get caught up and be dogmatic and say, if there's no local content, we won't move on, because at the end of the day, people want to see this project happen. So if you are out there and you're doing some work in engineering, you probably want to start looking at it. If you're doing some kind of hardcore vocational work like welding, facilities management, pipeline management, looking at working with some kind of valves, some kind of piping, catering services, looking at doing some kind of work when it comes into tilting or drilling, all of that. You want to start engaging that now. Do not wait until somebody gets a contract and then you ask yourself, why not me? One of the things I've really seen really affect a lot of domestic and regional companies is that we don't prepare ourselves. We don't get ready. We don't look at the tenders. We don't engage with Total's office. We don't engage with others who are doing the same thing or trying to really work with the procurement and supply chains offices. We just end up complaining. Integration without preparation is going to be frustration. So you want to start now so that you be at the top and not be at the bottom.
And yeah, I fully agree. But let me stand up for us entrepreneurs. It's a two-way street. As much as we go after these opportunities, foreign companies as well as foreign oil companies need to be open and realize that the companies they're seeing now are not the companies that they saw in 2000. I'm talking about the domestic companies. So we've got quite a number of local formed or regional formed companies that have got quite a lot of expertise, gained through maybe through strategic partnerships. So there's definitely a change from the scene when you compare it from 2000. I'd like to move to
Elizabeth, let me interrupt you there. I think you're right, but this is like dating. You go out there and find it. You are the hunter. You're not going to wait for Total to come find you. You're not going to wait for CNOC to come find you. Pack up your bags, go out there and knock on that door and say, let me in. I think that idea that we're going to think that these companies are going to come, they're going to find us, they're going to hand something to us because we happen to be local and regional. There is nobody that advocates local content more than I do, but you got to let your light shine. You have to be on the table. If you don't try to push yourself to be on the table, you're going to be on the menu. So don't wait. If you had a brochure or you had a submission or you went through the whole due diligence and qualification programs 4 or 5 years ago, and you think they're going to call you, maybe you had the wrong email or your phone number has changed already. Now get your stuff together, go right back and say, hello, remember me? I'm still here. I'm still hanging. I want to be on the list. They would not come find you. They will make availability for those who are hungry. Right now, a lot of people are hurting and hungry. So don't wait for Total to come find you. If you're listening, get out there, call them, tweet them. I sent a tweet yesterday, 2 days ago on Total, and guess what? They tweeted me back. They want me to shut up. They tweeted me back and we had a conversation. So you go out there and tweet, call, link, walk into their office, put up your stuff and say, I'm ready. What am I missing? Don't wait for Total. Total has money. You need Total more than Total needs you. So local companies need to quit their arrogance and go out there and present yourself. If you don't have the skill, find somebody else who has the skill, let them join you, and then you all make money together. I'm a capitalist, I like to make money. So get out there and make money. Don't wait for them to come.
Yes, we hear you, NJ. Thank you very much, NJ. So, Katy, I don't know if we're going to jump onto this, but can you pick up Isaac Busiri? Isaac Busiri had a question. I think Gilbert should be the one to answer this.
Okay.
Perfect. So I'm going to ask Isaac's question, but first a couple of quick announcements. One, if you're a member of the media, I see some media submitting questions in the chat box and also submitting questions on the Q&A. Instead, if you can please message in the chat box, hi, I'm media, and my colleague Eidener is going to get you set up for the press conference that's going to take place at the end of the call, and where you can actually ask those questions live. So as I'm ignoring your questions on the Q&A box, don't get upset, because if you're a member of the media, we're going to have an opportunity at the end for you to ask your questions live. Also, we've received over 60 questions already from the audience, so this is fantastic. We're getting a lot of engagement. if we're not able to get to everybody's questions, just know that we're really thankful that we're getting so many, and we're going through them as quickly as possible. So Isaac's question, it has always been communicated that the industry, wants to recruit over 70% local capacity. However, with the current situations in the oil industry worldwide and people moving away from the industry, and the delays in the East Africa oil industry, is this still feasible? How is Uganda trying to get people interested in the industry?
Mr. Gilbert.
Okay. Thanks for that. That's a good question. Thanks, Isaac. Well, actually, this would be a good point for me to talk about one of our sister institutions, which is the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. Hosted within the Petroleum Authority of Uganda is a major initiative for national content. And it's broken down into 3 parts, all of which are important. So one of the parts is the National Oil and Gas Talent Register. So I think part of Isaac's question is around recruitment. And so, of course, there's going to be a big need for local content and local recruitment. It just makes business sense. And I would really encourage anyone on this call, people like Isaac, to really register on the National Oil and Gas Talent Register, because all these companies who come either as contractors or subcontractors or service providers will need local talent, and that talent exists. And some of it is in Uganda, some of it is regional, some of it is global. I'm talking about Ugandans. The second is the National Suppliers Database. As mentioned by NJ, one is recruitment, the other is business. And once again, we have national content laws and regulations, and part of that and participating in that is the National Supplier Database. The Petroleum Authority also has an annual national content conference. It has been very well received. And I think the next one that happens is going to be even better, because this is another way of I guess, making the opportunities known to the wider community. Okay. With respect to the question, I guess there was one more part of his question, and I just want to make sure I answer it, and this is more philosophical, is that it is true that the oil and gas industry is going through a bit of a dip right now with the oil price. But the result, this drop in oil price is a result of several things. And none of these things at this point in time are permanent. And so the expectation is that there's going to be a stabilization in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months at some point. And so therefore, there's always going to be a need in the oil and gas industry, both in the upstream and the midstream and downstream. So there'll always be a need for talent.
Okay, thanks, Gilbert. I think that kind of follows on from a question that Chison had asked, and unfortunately, we were not able to have a representative from PAU, Petroleum Authority Uganda. I just like the participants to know we are going to have another webinar where we bring PAU, and I think it'll be very good for entrepreneurs. So Chison, you're asking about companies from outside partnering with companies in Uganda. The first thing is make sure you register. Go to Petroleum Authority Uganda. It's a fantastic website. It will tell you all the companies that are registered in Uganda, how you register, and that's the only way you can tender in Uganda, the only way you can do business. So, so if you want additional questions or additional information, we'll be happy to provide that to you afterwards. Katie, do you have another question we can put in with regards to local content?
I do, actually, and because we're getting so many questions, I'm going to kind of take some people's and merge them into one bigger question. Go ahead. And it's going to be on the same topic. So we're getting a lot of questions about, you know, other countries in the region. You know, what does local content look like in Uganda for other African countries, right? So is there a preference in local content, for example, if there's not a company in Uganda that can take on a particular contract, is preference given to a company in Kenya, for example? So what are the regional aspects to local content? How can regional companies and even, you know, companies across the continent get involved? And what's the kind of the setup, or is there a setup for a preference for regional suppliers or African suppliers over international suppliers?
So Katy, I think that kind of follows into what I was talking about with PAU, but I'd like Dr. Elly to respond to that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, we should not be very excited about Total or UNOC trying to fight for local content for us. These companies already have suppliers who are very well known, who are very efficient, and who will help them to meet their objectives in time and on cost. We, the local content people, are going to be literally interfering in their usual business. So but we must interfere because we are also protected by the law. In the case of Uganda, almost 26 jobs have been ring-fenced for local content companies. But I'm not very excited about the Uganda local content companies only without the region. Because when you look at Mozambique, Cabo Delgado is nearer to Kampala than it is to Maputo. They have discovered business in gas there, which is worth 120 billion. Ours is about 20 billion in totality, if you look at the other aspects. So they are 6 times bigger than us. When you look at Tanzania, the gas resources they have are, in excess of 4 or 5 times of what we have in Uganda. When you look at the discoveries in Kenya going on, it's very impressive, and I'm sure they are going to discover more oil and more gas. When you look at South Sudan, the situation is more established than anywhere else because for them, they're in production. Only the politics have disrupted them, but they have sorted it out now, hopefully, and they are ready. When you look at DRC, Lake Albert region where we have the oil, the other day I was saying it's like being in a swimming pool, and Uganda has half of the swimming pool, and DRC has the other side of the swimming pool. So there is oil in this. So now Uganda is a complete nucleus right at the center of this local content. And these countries have their own local content laws and policies, which are almost the same as Uganda's. What we need in order to make an impression is take the opportunity of what God has put in front of us as a region and operate. And if Uganda becomes the first country to produce oil in this region, then it will be the first country to develop its local content and people can try. But Ugandans, I argue to try and look for partners in Tanzania, in Kenya, in South Sudan, in DRC, and in Mozambique. Because once those people open up, instead of going to Thailand and Korea and China and wherever else in Europe to look for players, they will be looking for us because we shall have proven to them that we are capable of doing the job. Luckily, Total is invested heavily in Kenya and also in Mozambique. So the players they will have as local content players in Uganda will be easily afforded the opportunity to service the companies in Mozambique. Therefore, I call upon Ugandans who are listening and members of the region to try and team up so that we build muscle enough to attract these oil companies to give us the jobs to do and not underestimate the capacity of local people. Lastly, I call upon governments, all governments in the region, seriously consider putting up a local content fund, finance it, and facilitate local people in participating in local content opportunities. These opportunities are not permanent.
No,
we
Dr.
need to exploit them.
Yeah, Dr. We have so many questions, so I just want to make sure that we get as much as possible. And I totally agree with you on regional content. I think we had said in our first webinar that we already have a company, Inspector Africa, who has a 5-year history with Total in wellhead management, and they teamed up with Savo Oilfield Services from Kenya. So you have a Uganda-Kenyan company that was featured by Africa Development Bank, and I have to admit I'm the CEO of Savo in case people don't know. So I guess would be considered to be the first two companies that really saw this regional perspective, and we urge everybody to really jump onto that train. Before we move on to a PST question for NJ, Brian, I want you to I want your thoughts on this regional local content, because I think it's something that's very important.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. And I think there's something that's very close for me because, you know, I spent last year in government, and so I was a bit of a poacher turned gamekeeper. And I think that one of the big stumbling blocks that we've had when we talk about local content is they say there's local content and then there's local content, where you find that there's a proneness for people saying that the oil is in our region and we want to protect the jobs in that region. But I think that is, you know, a huge fallacy because, and I completely agree with Mr. Karuhanga in that, you know, why can we not be like the Philippines, who are the largest exporters of labor in oil and gas across the globe? You know, why are we not building our skills and capacity so that we in this region will be exporting our labor and do it competitively across the world? And so for me, one of the things that the governments need to look at is this idea of completely putting out of the picture this idea of protectionism and local content, and not being myopic and looking at the bigger picture here, where we develop the region. For the international companies coming in, I think there's legislation, of course, there that makes it that there has to be credible local content and not briefcase companies that are formed. And you have people like yourself, Savo, in Kenya. We've got people like Benita Bagaria of Albertine, women-run organizations that are local. How do you partner with those people to ensure that the skills and capacity transfer is being done? Yeah. And how do you actually twist the arms of companies when they're being naughty and not behaving and not transferring skills and you know, across the region? So I agree completely with Elly in that we should be looking regionally. And the idea of relaxing things like permits to work, freedom of movement for our peoples within the East African region under the tenets of the East African community, so that people can set up subsidiaries in the different regional countries and operate, because overall it is good for us, for all of us. So I couldn't agree more. And this has to happen. And as I said, this is an adrenaline shot. It's the fast salvo with this Total investment. And how do we then take that and run with it so that in the next 10, 15 years, you know, we can be the Philippines of Africa, where we export our labor across the world and we're doing it competitively because our people are bright and they can do the work.
Yeah, if I also may add that we, in terms of the oil field service sector where I'm at, we shouldn't forget the international or the global oil field service sectors like Baker Hughes, who have been very, very instrumental. If you look at within the region, they have really pushed through a program they have called Channel Partners, where they're really really working together as full partners with local companies. And one of them, you know, is our dear friend Carrie's company, Bentworth Energy. That is a Baker Hughes Kenyan partnership that is doing very well and is being highlighted. So we definitely want to see more Carries running around the region.
And I think, Liz, for the other people on the call, in terms of internationals who are interested, I think they should give Tox Aziz a call at Baker Hughes, because I think Baker Hughes has really done a really good job in terms of looking at capacity building for local companies and strengthening them also financially to be able to do some of these jobs.
Yes, because we know finance is really a big issue, Elly, as you know. It's all well and good to be forming companies, but actually being able to implement these projects are a problem. But let me just shift the topic a little bit because we have so much to cover. Katy, we wanted to look at the PSA question from Donald Mackay. I hope I pronounced it properly.
Yes, we are getting a lot of questions on this issue, and actually I'm going to start with a question that we received in the chat box. And Greg Coleman, you're lucky that I saw it, because we normally don't monitor the chat box for Q&A. So everybody, this is a reminder to submit your questions to the Q&A box. But it's a very good question. The tax treatment announced by Tullow in their sale seems to be a big compromise for the government. What is the view of the panelists on the need for any other fiscal changes in the PSA and other taxes in Uganda?
So maybe we can get NJ. NJ, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Before I jump on that, I think I just want to chime in on this local content issue for the last time before I get on the tax issue, PSC. I think we should stop waiting on the companies to grow local content. There is a role for companies, but there's also a role for government. There is a role for that the state has to play to empower its people. And Elly talked about creating a local content fund. You're damn right. That's what it's really important, and that you drive it. But also when it comes to people, you cannot get kids out of high school who sometimes are like functional illiterates, and you expect them to work in big oil field services and everything. We have to, let's be honest, Uganda is a little bit like 10 years late. We have to prepare these young people to get them into jobs now. You get an FID, you get an opportunity, get these young people to work now. So we're 10 years late. We got to train these people and train fast to get in. And yes, regional content, at the chamber, we've always mentioned had a policy, which I think Elly highlighted on local, regional, and Africa-wide content. You can't be moving a continent on a place where you're having the Africa Free Trade Act, and then you localizing and nationalizing services. But when it comes into Katy's questions on fiscal changes that should be anticipated on the PSCs, these issues come with the territory. It comes from PSC to PSC, term to term. Okay, for me, I'm a low tax guy. I'm a free market guy. I believe in low taxes, limited government, and more should, and let the market work. But also you have to look at some of these fiscal terms when it comes to operation and developing to make sure that companies can invest more. Uganda is having a licensing round right now. So that's where you have to start looking at that interaction with companies to see how you're going to make these PSCs really, you have to incentivize that. And I tell you why. We in Africa today, we're competing for dollars, not between Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania. You're competing for dollars with big fields in places where we never dreamt you're going to find petroleum or gas. You're looking at, nobody ever thought Mozambique was going to have big gas discoveries 8, 9, 10, 20 years ago. Nobody thought about Senegal. But today, you got new kids on the block that are very attractive. They've created an enabling environment. System is working. Look at Guyana. Look at Suriname. They are coming and it's going, and they are making those PSCs very, very nice. So we have to look at a mirror. You know, I think sometimes I know some people told me, well, NJ, you know, we just mirror images, you know, but you know, I use a mirror every morning. My hair is bad, but you know, I don't just walk out of there trying to comb that hair. Mirrors are to correct what you see, not reflect what you see. We need to look at the mirror and correct what we see in our PSCs, so we incentivize a lot of it. And yes, sometimes we might have to look at providing more incentives, even limiting some of the local content rules on exploration, because you got to explore, explore, explore. You are not going to get production if you don't explore. And if in order to get these explorers, you have to incentivize those PSCs. And yes, sometimes tax will be, taxation will be part of it. I might not be saying the popular things, but in your guts, you know I'm right. If you don't do those things, you are not going to really incentivize growth and encourage more investment, because we are no longer the kids that everybody wants to come on. We need to be careful. Others are getting ready, and we need to stop being cocky and crazy. Let's incentivize those PSCs and attract more people into new licenses, but don't get stuck. We need local content, but there has to be some context in it. So incentivize PSCs, low taxes, limited government, individual liberty, and create an enabling environment. You're going to see dollars flowing into the country and the regions. That's what it happens.
Okay, so the question we're trying to ask you, NJ, thank you very much. Katy, do you want to go into Donald's question?
Yes, I do. So Donald Mackey asked, dear panelists, Ghana in particular has seen a slowdown in development from oil companies, with some renegotiating their PSA terms. Do you anticipate this happening in Uganda with the Total deal? So I'd be interested to hear Brian's perspective, on what's happening in Ghana with PSA terms, and then move, into the Uganda perspective. What do you think, Liz?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Okay, yeah, just very quickly, because the topic is not Ghana today, but I think what you see happening is governments are becoming much more sophisticated and aware, and it does hearken to the point that NJ made, is that NJ is a lawyer and he was trained at posh schools, but effectively the message we're trying to say is, don't kill the cow before you start milking it. Yeah? And we should be looking at taxing of revenues and not on capital expenditure, to be able to create an enabling fiscal environment for companies to invest, because capital flights and dollars will go where the investment terms are best. So if you look at Ghana and the conversations that are happening today, it's public knowledge that a lot of not just the PSAs, but even the power purchase agreements are being renegotiated to ensure that there is a good balance and a good deal between a fiscal balance between the revenues that the government take, and indeed ensuring that there is sufficient profitability for the people who are taking the risks from exploration to development in developing these projects. So I think that it is the impetus of any government to continuously monitor the environment, and it works both ways. When times are good and we're all popping champagne, when oil was $147 a barrel, we all share the wealth. But at the same time, when oil is $20 a barrel, we still have to incentivize companies, but we all feel the pain jointly. So it should be a bit of a balance. And you will see governments constantly reviewing fiscal terms, and hopefully to ensure that they are fair and strike a balance. And I think that is the way to go.
If I may, Brian and Katy, if you go into our Dropbox, I don't know if the link has been put up, but through the Africa Energy Chamber, and I know this is NJ's work in particular, we have a new agenda called the Common Sense Agenda, and it has 10 agendas, and one of them is this whole thing of PSAs. We also look at regional local content, tax regimes, basically things that governments need to do, especially during this COVID environment, to get ourselves ready when the cycle starts going up. NJ, I want to push everybody to that agenda of yours that's in the Dropbox. But Gilbert, maybe we can.
Well, I was going to go ahead, Elizabeth.
I just wanted to ask you what Katy wanted to know, or was asking about the PSAs more specifically to Uganda.
Yeah. So look, from looking at it I think the case can be made fairly clearly from, let's say, the contractor or IOC's perspective. But I think to see a total picture, one has to also look at it from the government's perspective. So governments around the world, not just Uganda or this region, around the world, are very cautious to reopen any PSC renegotiations, because as you can imagine, when PSCs are negotiated, these are long-term contracts. They're very strong. On the basis of these contracts, ministries and governments project revenues and make plans. So reopening a production sharing contract is not a simple thing. And so it should be understood why governments are really not, I wouldn't say against it, but take a more cautious or conservative approach. That must be understood and by everyone who's on this call. So with respect, so on the basis of that, I think coming to Uganda's case, there's the best time for companies to come in and negotiate is of course prior to the signing. And we are going through a second licensing round right now in Uganda. We have model PSAs. That provides a very good opportunity for companies to come in and negotiate the best deals that they can. Because what you're doing is you're allocating value. And so renegotiating a PSC is reallocating value. that, of course, as you can imagine from a government perspective, is a very uncomfortable thing. So, and then, of course, it is true we are in a COVID situation, but one must recognize that these PSAs are 25-year-long PSAs, sometimes longer. So COVID, which may be 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, let's say 5 years, is still shorter than the term of the PSA. So it's not simply that because it's, you can't just negotiate and change the 35-year term structure on the basis of 1 or 2 incidents.
Okay,
with respect to the Lake Albert project, I think the government has already given several fiscal incentives and waivers. I will not go through the list, from VAT to withholding tax, and we're in the process of negotiating to make the eco pipeline financially viable. So I think the expectation of a renegotiation of PSCs at this point, take note, might add some time to the period to final investment decision. Because we have to recognize renegotiating a production sharing contract is not a short process. It could be a very long process, and governments, it must be understood, are quite uncomfortable to do that. Something that is a bit more practical, and I think the government of Uganda, the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum, is also considering, and I know the same thing is happening in Ghana, I know it's happening in Kenya and all over the world, is the structure of the production sharing contracts is in terms, initial term, first period, second period. It is possible to negotiate extensions of periods for companies to fulfill their work obligations. That is a more practical way of getting some relief for the companies. So it shouldn't be an automatic review of the commercial contract itself. There are many other mechanisms available which oil companies and governments can sit down and discuss and come to good conclusions for both sides.
Excellent. So before we look at other exploration opportunities that are in Uganda, just quickly, Gilbert, there's a question that Robert has come up with, again, Robert Salmon, in terms of the fact that we are looking at $20 to $30 price per barrel. Do you have any concerns of the economic viability of the Karuhanga project?
Sure. Okay, that's a good question. Thanks, Robert. So maybe the way to answer this question, although it might seem a little roundabout, is to understand a little bit about how companies make their final investment decisions.
Can you do that in 1 minute? We've got a lot to
All right, okay. So the short of the long story is that most companies take their investment decisions on long-term steering value. So whereas the oil price today may be $20 or $30, the investment decision will be made on a long-term view. And each company has its own long-term steering value. Each company has its own hurdle rate, meaning its minimum return on investment. And I think the transaction that has happened in the last month or so, I think gives a good indication about the strategic value of the Lake Albert project to Total and possibly CNOOC if they preempt.
Okay, excellent. I'd like to bring Katy in. She has a question for Honorable Elly. Katy, you there?
So Honorable Elly, this question was directed to you specifically from William Senindi. My question, are you comfortable with the infrastructure that we have in place in Uganda for the oil and gas industry to take off? And are you also comfortable that Uganda has the right skills in place in order for the industry to take off?
Yes, just before I answer, William, if you don't mind, I just have a quick statement to make on the PSAs. The oil companies, when they came to Africa, initially they really took a very big chunk of the business, and Africa got a raw deal. By the time they came to Uganda, all the NGOs from Western world had come and warned Uganda about the dangers of these oil companies. And Uganda went and trained Ugandans to be able to negotiate these PSAs. And so the Ugandans tried to be as patriotic as they could, which was right, and they struck what was considered a very good deal. Now, of course, because it took a long time to negotiate even clauses small clauses like a stabilization clause. It took us 1 year to negotiate and agree a stabilization clause. To reopen those would mean politicians in parliament would come back and ask all sorts of questions. Let's avoid that road of renegotiating PSAs. However, the economic reality on the ground, on the price of oil, will make it impossible for some of these oil companies to survive, especially the independents and the wildcats who had participated in this business. And we will discourage, those terms might discourage even local content from participating in exploration and in oil industry. So there has to be a balance. The companies in countries in Africa have matured. They now understand the oil industry very well, and they have started giving concessions. In the case of Uganda, I think we've done more than 17 responsible investments that will make the oil companies find it easy to operate in Uganda, to answer William's question. We have been obligated to build roads, what we call oil roads, and the countries have gone out and borrowed money to make very good roads in the Albert and Graben, and they have to do roads also for the products, 211 kilometers, which government is obligated to build. And plus, they have all these centers. They have, in the case of Hoima, we have a 29 square kilometers of land earmarked by the government. People have been compensated by the government to open the way for subsidiary companies, chemical companies in the oil industry to invest for the oil and gas. So there is quite a lot of sufficient physical infrastructure, which the government has borrowed a lot of money in order to allow, to make it easier for oil companies to operate. On the side of human resource, you will be surprised that probably now in Uganda, we have more than 300 trained lawyers from Aberdeen and from Dundee and other European and Western American places who have been trained in oil and gas. And so are the engineers, so are the people in commercial aspects, and so is that gentleman in front of you, Gilbert Kamuntu. This is one of those products of the Ugandans who have been trained and who speak authoritatively about the industry. He is just one of a number. If we put them in a queue, he will probably be number 100. So we have sufficient resources on the ground to really meet the requirement required by the oil companies. But for them, they doubt. They are not so sure. The few of them, like Tullow, when I was their president, we had people working in the North Sea. We had people working in the London office in South America. Ugandans were in Ghana. Young ladies in Ghana in the ocean, at the rig. I went to the rig, I saw that with my eyes. We were in Texas. There are so many Ugandans in Texas, in Houston, involved in oil and gas. We have good infrastructure out there. The only problem is that if we don't manage this coronavirus and make Uganda a hostile place for people to come, then we have a challenge. But so far, Uganda is doing an excellent job on management of that.
So, Dr. Elly, before we move on to other opportunities in just Tilenga, please just make it a yes or no. This capital gains tax, will this be an issue this time round?
No.
Thank you.
No, in fact, no, not at all, because the government has negotiated and with Total, and it's one of the things that they have overcome.
Okay, good.
So
okay. Okay, excellent. Carol Mubali, we've answered your question. So I want to look at other opportunities. I think somebody had raised, we have a second bid round, licensing round. We know that besides Total and UNOC, we also have Arma and Oranto. Is it Oranto that's working already?
Yes.
So what, can you please tell our participants, what other opportunities are there? If we can't all get jobs with UNOC and Total, we have other companies that we can go to.
Yeah.
So Gilbert, yes.
Okay, so yes, thanks Elizabeth. So just to mention that Uganda is going through a second licensing round as we speak. There are 5 blocks that are available for any companies online who are interested. I would direct them to the website. That's www.petroleum.go.ug. I'll just say that again, www.petroleum.go.ug. So these are 5 blocks altogether, about just under 5,000 square kilometers. All of them are in the Albertine Graben. You know, of course, as we mentioned, FID is coming up shortly. So I think if you talk about an opportunity for companies to come in and do exploration and see immediate upside in their value, this is the time. So we have a second exploration round that's coming up, as I mentioned. The deadline is 30th September this year. So I would encourage anyone on this call, any local, regional, international companies, please participate. And as you can imagine, now is the time to get in and lock in good value.
Excellent, excellent. Katy, do we have any questions? Because I see something from Sergio, but do you have any other questions in relation to exploration?
I was just looking at that. Let's move to Sergio's question, Liz, and I'll keep looking for E&P specific.
Yeah, I'm going to go, NJ, maybe you can answer this question, and maybe Dr. Elly can follow, or Brian. So Sergio from the Africa Energy Chamber asks, I see this recent move in Uganda as an opportunistic move based on taking advantage of the current market situation. 6 months prior, everyone was talking about transition, and that was a narrative shift that was scaring Africa oil nation, scarring Africa oil nations for the sake of making oil producers renew their clean agenda, image, and look good. That noise has died down. How do we interpret this going forward and take most benefits? And somebody just, okay. All right, NJ, you know what Sergio is asking?
I think yes, there is always something which this is the energy transition and climate change is something that the industry is going to have to deal with. We cannot, as an industry, walk away from this. That's the world we see. COVID-19 kind of turned the noise off a little bit. It doesn't mean it's not coming back. The oil companies are paying close and keen attention to it. Like what I always say, you're not going to have a lot more oil, and you won't see people calling themselves oil and gas companies a lot more. You see them calling themselves energy companies, paying attention to the new world we live in. One of the key things we have to continue as Africans be watchful about is while we continue trying to be good stewards of the environment, we have to pay more attention towards energy poverty, but we have to also continue doing deals and using natural resources to develop our countries, our continent, and really try to see how you improve the people's life. I don't fault somebody from Europe or from America for pushing that agenda aggressively around the continent. They have polluted 13 times more than we have polluted in Africa. But also, you bring it home and you bring it to the kitchen table. You take for example, a lady who is giving birth in the Gambia, and the light switches off in that hospital room because they have no lights. And go tell them that you go call Greta, explain to them why grandma died or why that didn't happen, and you get that. I'm not in the, we so broke, so poor, we don't have so much to get lectures from Greta about why we don't have food. When I was hungry, I didn't see Greta coming in to bring me with a plate. So I'm still pro-oil. I still believe this industry is still a force for good. I think this industry has created so much more innovation, and a lot more is going to come out of it. And yes, some people will be really angry and everything, but yes, energy transition is real, but we got to lead it. It is a chance for us to use young Ugandans, young Kenyans who can create innovation hubs and technology hubs to really generate a new pathway for energy. Elly was just talking about gas out there in Tanzania and in Mozambique. This is time for us to start using natural gas or even looking at nuclear energy to really see how we do use our own resources to do that transition and not wait for Europe to send us technology and other things to do that transition. Because for me, at the end of the day, it's this sense of self-reliance. If we have to go back and beg Europe and America and China for money to take care of ourselves, then we're not really doing our people a service. So we need to use our resources to really empower ourselves. So I think energy transition is real. Deals are going to continue to happen. I think Africans make the mistake to not engage the industry and do deals and develop the industry, and you sit back and say, well, energy in the oil and gas is going to be out, so I'm waiting for energy transition. You're going to die before you have energy transition. So right now, do deals so that when you die, at least you'll be buried in the coffin. Thank you.
Brian.
Yeah.
Very quickly before you do that, because there's a study that just come out of Oxford University. As you know, the oil industry is affecting everyone. And if you look at the US in particular, there's this big debate going on whether we should give relief to oil companies in the US. So this Oxford study came out and said, if you fund green energy projects, you are going to be able to employ more people. And I had to scratch my head when I read this. So this is all around this whole climate thing of oil and gas being looked at as dirty fuel. Please give us your opinion.
Well, but these studies are always going to be there. I could have my own study tomorrow that says that oil is going to give more things. Let's be honest. In Africa, the oil and gas industry has created more development than anything. We're just ashamed of an industry that we don't need to be ashamed of. If you look at the billionaires that the oil industry has created, when you look at Nigeria, for example, so many Nigerian guys running marginal oil fields, it's all oil. We're talking about Ghana, Brian, you probably see Springfield, it's oil. So the oil and gas, I think right now, people in this industry, you are ashamed of the industry for no reason. I would rather go with oil and gas with a gasoline jacket around my back to hell than sit back and listen to some intellectual out of Oxford tell me something that was never there. You knew we had wind before, but you were financing oil. You knew we had the sun, but you were financing oil. How the hell is it that you come back to me today and say, pack up your oil, shut down your mining fields, shut down your natural resources. You have wind anyway. Not today, not now. And they're going to find 2, 3 of our brothers and sisters that they're going to keep preaching that language. I don't agree with that. For me, we need to use industry to raise people out of poverty. That is really, really the issue now. You have 650 million people without any kind of access to power, any kind of access to electricity around this good continent. How many compare that with Norway and Switzerland and Denmark and Sweden or the North Pole? They don't have that. So you're not going to tell me these 650 million babies don't have the right to any kind of electricity. I disagree with that. We cannot create manufacturing. We cannot run factories without these oil and gas resources. So, sorry, let's delay that stuff right now. Let's get these resources. Try to live for 2 or 3 days without your iPhones because you can't charge them, and then you tell me that we transition tomorrow.
No, we definitely agree. Brian, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, Brian.
No, NJ, I think we're very clear where you stand. I think we're very clear where you stand on these issues, but I think let me support that with a couple of things. Number one, the total output in terms of gigawatt supplies of electricity across the whole African continent, total, is what China adds to its grid mix every 2 years. So if you look at the total supply is what China adds every 2 years. We have a long way to go. Number two, one of the major alleviators of poverty is access to energy. That is just a fact. And indeed, when we have 70 to 80% of the people on our continent with no access to energy, Now, if you look at the projections of even the International Energy Agency, looking at even out to 2050, oil and gas will still be, a major part of the energy mix, even with renewables growing. Yeah, what you see coming down very drastically is coal, of course, being the dirtiest fuel. Yeah, but oil and gas is still part of the mix. Yeah, and when you look at companies, so all of the majors, you'll see their ambitions. Shell has publicly stated by 2050, it'll be a net zero carbon emissions company across the world. That is a bold ambition. Yeah, and other companies are following suit. Yeah, so we need to think about this in terms of thinking about how we develop our resources. The thing with the life cycle of oil and gas projects is these put revenues into government's pockets that help alleviate poverty, hopefully. Yeah, these distribute wealth through supply chains. And so oil and gas is not going anywhere anytime soon. It will still be part of the energy mix. Yeah, we need to develop these resources. We need to explore, as we said, to add to our resource growth. And when it comes to oil and also associated gas, gas is acknowledged as the bridge to renewables. Yeah, if you're looking for something that will bridge that gap, it will be gas. So if you look at Mozambique, Tanzania, yeah, it is all part of the mix. So let us not be naive and say that that oil will disappear anytime soon. I think these resources will be developed. They have to be developed, to contribute directly to the GDP of our countries. Yeah, as we at the same time still look at not having only dependence on oil and having diversified economies. Yeah, that we can make that transition into a renewable world over the next 50 years. But oil and gas will still be part of the mix, no doubt about it.
I think we're all in agreement. I'm just about to open the floor to the media. Just one last question for you, Dr. Elly, and then after that, I'll ask everyone to wrap up. I know we've got so many questions here. We've been trying to get everyone's question. Dr. Elly, when does Dr. think the refinery project will take FID, considering that the JV partners have pushed for 3 clear years of full report before refinery construction? And that's from Paul Kelechi.
Maybe 3 years, I don't know.
Maybe I can support Honorable Elly in this question, since it's part of our portfolio as UNOC. Okay. So we are planning for a final investment decision on the refinery in the second half of 2021 or the first half of 2022. So the refinery is currently going through its engineering design, front-end engineering design, about 35%, 40% complete. We're doing all the technical work, and we're about to start the commercial agreements. So we are on course to take an investment decision within the year coming 2021, as I mentioned, or maybe some spillover into 2022.
Okay, thank you. And then the very last one, it was actually directed to me, but I'm a moderator, so I'll push it to Brian or anyone else on the panel. Does Elizabeth Rogo think that Kenya can still play a role in the ECOP, that's the pipeline, because Tanga in Tanzania is the terminus? There's always been this argument going on that the pipeline may come back to Kenya. Brian, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think it's very clear. I mean, given the sentiments from the president of Uganda and the president of Tanzania that the ECO pipeline will go ahead, and I think that still looks very clear. With regards to Kenya and the development in Turkana, I think that will have to be looked at on the strength of the investment decision for that particular project. I think on record, the optimal solution, of course, is one pipeline through the region to amalgamate and actually give strength to the idea of having, refining products within the region. But I think we're at a point now where it does look like, that pipeline, from Hoima to Tanga is a reality. I think for the Kenya project is now looking at the strength of, given the investments that are being made in Lamu, the LabSet project, that will have to be able to see whether that project will stand on its own 2 feet for the evacuation of the Turkana oil, given that there's also the dynamic of South Sudan, and whether there is another evacuation route for South Sudan south, effectively, which could provide some benefits. So my personal view is that project, when and if the time comes for an FID, will have to be looked at the Kenya project on whether it stands on its own 2 feet economically. But I feel that the Hoima to Tanga route now looks like it will go ahead.
Okay, and we also know that there's a natural gas pipeline, Dr. Elly, correct? That's already been, it's been signed, I think it was in 2018, from Tanzania to Uganda to bring liquefied natural gas. Is that still on the table, Dr. Elly or Gilbert?
Yes, I'm happy to take that question. You're absolutely right. As we speak, teams is a joint ministry team from the government of Uganda and government of Tanzania who have kicked off a feasibility study for a natural gas pipeline to transport gas from in the opposite direction from Tanzania into Uganda. So the work is going on. It's a technical study. It will follow a similar route to the ECO pipeline, and that's just an ongoing project. It's been kicked off.
So basically, in summary, for the Karuhanga project, we're looking at the refinery, we're looking at the ECOP, that's the crude pipeline, and we're looking at this new liquefied natural pipeline, which is very unique because both pipelines are crossing borders. Well, let me just say for the natural gas pipeline, it's the only one that's crossing borders within East Africa, and therefore we see a big economic strength between Tanzania and Uganda for sure. Okay, let me use this opportunity to open the floor to the media. Katy, do you want to take over from here?
Oh, yes. So my colleague Adonor is going to unmute the microphone for Ayuk Griffiths from African Energy. So Ayuk, whenever you're ready and we can hear you, if you can.
We lost Katy.
Yes.
We lost the name of the journalist, please.
Ayuk Griffiths from African Energy. And Thalia, if you can just keep it short with 1 or 2 questions for the members of the panel. Ida, do you have that ready? All right, I think we're having some technical difficulties with Thalia. So we'll move on to Robert Perkins from S&P Platts. Robert.
Okay, while we're trying to get the journalists on board, should we just, I've got a couple more questions I can ask, and then let me know when you're ready, Katy.
Okay, I think Robert.
Hello, hi.
Perfect. I can hear you.
Yeah, hi, sorry about that. So thanks for taking my question, guys. I had a couple of questions. I guess they were kind of grouped around two themes. I guess these are mainly for Elly and Gilbert. First of all, to bring it back to the pipeline FID issues, and we noted that Tanzania this week, the Minister of Energy came out with a budget statement referring to the potential start of construction of the pipeline in April next year. We wanted to know, is that your understanding as well, if even if the FID is taken in the next months or before the end of the year at least, is April the earliest, then in 2021 when construction could start? And then again, what's your expectation in terms of how many years it would take to complete the pipeline? And then secondly, there was the issue on the offtake contracts. Any updates there in terms of when Uganda would expect to see the offtake contracts completed? Would they happen before FID? And who are the main customers? I mean, I'm guessing we're looking at India, perhaps China here. And on the values, is there any numbers been talked about in terms of what Uganda expects to get by way of discount, say, to Brent for this crude, which is, obviously has high levels of wax and may not be as valuable as some of the. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. We have a bit of a problem with your line, but hopefully the speakers have heard. Who'd like to start first?
Okay, so maybe what I can do, I'll first ask Honorable Elly. I don't know if you mind. Maybe I can start and you can.
Yeah,
support. Okay, so the first question was around, I can say I have not myself heard the comments from the Minister of Energy in Tanzania, so I can't really comment on that, but what I can comment on is what we see as the project development process. We expect to get FID within the next, it's hard to put a timeline, but shortly, 6 months perhaps, or perhaps longer, 6+. And then what we also expect to see is early project activities. So setting down of camps and some of the other early project activities that need to be done. Ordering of long lead items and like. So that for us would constitute construction. The period of construction that we are looking at is between 3 to 3.5, possibly 4 years of construction. And this construction would be for the integrated project. So the project, the construction will be for both the upstream, that would be the drilling of the wells, the construction of the processing facilities for the production of crude oil, and the laying down of pipe and all the associated facilities, including the port facilities for the crude oil pipeline. So it's an integrated project. It will have to be an integrated construction, an integrated first oil.
So Gilbert, before Dr. Elly jumps in, have we had Uganda released any tenders with regards to the ECOP?
No, not yet. So I think a lot of those processes will be restarted now that this transaction is completed and we're in the process of getting FID. A lot of the ECOP project activities, including tendering, going out for EPC, will be restarted. So for anyone on the call, on the panelists or attendees, I would suggest getting in touch with your focal points in the Total team who have been managing the contracting process for the pipeline to understand what the process is for restarting.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Elly?
I think Gilbert answered it very well. I don't have much to add really on that.
Okay, good. Anyone want to answer before we move to somebody else? If not, let's move on, Katy. Next journalist.
Okay, so Ida, if you can please get Diane Sutherland on the phone. Diane is from, sorry, I think she's from Petroleum Africa.
Ah, yes, everyone knows Diane.
Diane from Petroleum Africa. So we're just going to wait for her for just a minute to get on the phone.
Yes, so I'm just saying Diane Sutherland, she's very well known. She's the CEO of Petroleum Africa. Dr. Elly, you must know her. Very dynamic lady.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead.
Hi.
Diane.
It's very nice to see everybody from so far away since we can't all be together. So thanks for holding this webinar and thanks for taking my question. Basically, we've already touched on it, but I just wanted to ask, in light of the COVID pandemic and the oil price, besides the deadline date for the Uganda licensing round being pushed back, have there been any other significant changes to the licensing round?
Gilbert?
No changes to the process or the requirements for qualification. Is simply a change in the timeline.
Okay, all right. Well, so, and you said that was in September, then the deadline is coming.
And just for Diane, just to remind you, the website, if you need more information, is www.petroleum.go.ug.
Okay, yep, I have it. Thank you. Well, I do have one quick other question. I know we also touched on the energy transition and that oil and gas will be the catalyst to economic development for the foreseeable future. But are there some plans for integrating sustainable energy into the oil and gas developments? I know there's a lot of hybrid projects using solar or wind power on facilities, freestanding facilities, or is there anything like that being planned by Uganda?
It's a good question. What I can say is definitely being considered right now. Go ahead.
Yes, but what we are really excited about is this pipeline to bring gas from Tanzania to Uganda to help spur the development of our iron ore, because we have iron ore resources which will last us more than 100 years, and we would like to develop a steel industry. The only way to do that is if we get this gas from Tanzania. And so that is going to be clean energy in a way. And we are all thinking it's everything else, if it happens as an integrated project and the gas is thrown in the mix, I see a lot of excitement going on. Remember, Uganda has also invested a lot of money in building a new airport in Hoima, in the Lake Albert and Grabin. I think it cost us more than 350 million pounds. And in fact, the airport is more than half ready. So yeah, and all this is supposed to be an integrated project. So let's look forward to this project taking place.
And if I may add, Dr. Elly, you also have, sorry, Diane, I'm just going to say quickly, you also have a new geothermal drilling exploration that just started.
Yes, a lot of geothermal, not as much as Kenya has so far, because Kenya has quite substantial, as you know that, Elizabeth.
Yes.
But we have substantial geothermal resources, not yet really exploited, but they're already identified.
Thank you. Diane, are you still there? Are you done?
Yeah, I'm good.
But,
just thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Diane, you don't spend any time in Uganda. We look forward to you coming. When the
I know
lifted.
It's been a long time. I'm looking for the next EAPC in Kampala.
Right. You ask NJ, when NJ comes to Kampala, he doesn't want to go back to South Africa.
I don't either. And I'm very excited to go to Jinja on my next trip.
And you must see me.
I certainly will look forward to that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katy.
Excellent. Yes, and with that, we are out of time. Thank you, everyone, so much for this amazing webinar. Liz, I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap up, and maybe if we could just have 30 seconds to a minute wrap up from each speaker, but try to keep it brief.
Yes, yes, thank you very much. So, NJ, you're the man of brevity.
I think, thanks everybody. I think Uganda is going to be an amazing play. I think for many service companies that are taking a hit from COVID-19, Uganda has given some hope to the oil and gas industry in the region. Take it serious. It is, there is no better time to get engaged and get to play in that region right now. But also for local, regional, and African companies, this is a time to really extend your reach. You would meet a country, as Dr. Elly says, whenever I go there, I don't want to leave. The good news is that he cannot block my visa, so I'll keep coming. But I really hope African entrepreneurs and international service companies can see this as a place where they can actually go do business. We will continue pushing government and companies to create more opportunities. But guys, we have to be ready. We have to show up. We have to present the best of ourselves and this opportunity to work for everybody. So it's always an honor. And thank you, Gilbert, for teaching me a lot. And my teacher, my professor, Dr. Elly, and Brian, we love you. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Brian, would you like to go next, please?
Yeah, I think just to wrap up again, I think in summary, there's reason for real optimism for our region. As was said by Gilbert, oil and gas investments are long-term. The fact that we are in the doldrums today, again, this business is cyclical. We've been here before, we'll be here again, but it's all about long-term investments. And so this really is a shot in the arm. And I think the call for me is really thinking about how as a region, this will be the first salvo into really trying to enhance our economies and looking at the movement of labor and building of skills and capacity in this industry across Eastern Africa. And really that collaborative approach with this as the first salvo, And we're really hoping that we see Kenya and Tanzania start making strides towards FID, and also calling on South Sudan to look at opportunities of bringing some of the undeveloped fields in the south, to Kenya and to Uganda. So, you know, I think the key word here is just optimism, but also resilience to ride out the interesting times we're in.
Thank you very much, Brian. Mr. Gilbert, over
Thanks.
to you.
I think NJ and Brian have said most of it. So maybe just to add, yes, this webinar is about taking advantage of opportunities in Uganda's oil and gas sector. The transaction and what is coming ahead provide exciting times. We expect spillover of these opportunities to all the neighboring countries in the region. Exploration value in Uganda also knocks on DRC, which we haven't spoken about, and Tanzania. They have exploration blocks as well. The skills required and the services required cannot all be met by Ugandan companies and Ugandan talent alone. This is a regional play, so we expect there's going to be spillover value in the regional area. And we welcome everyone to Uganda to come and participate. If you have services, come to the Petroleum Authority, the Ministry of Energy, or to the National Oil Company, or come and set up and do business in Uganda. So the oil and gas industry in Uganda and Tanzania and Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, DRC is about to have a real step change.
Thank you very much, Gilbert. Honorable Elly, kindly for closing comments.
Okay, thank you. This resource, the oil and gas, is a great diplomatic weapon that must be unleashed in the region and brings us together the same way we have worked together to fight the coronavirus as a region. Our heads of state now have a diplomatic flag. Congo has to work with Uganda, with South Sudan has to work with Kenya and Uganda. Rwanda has to work and develop their gas resources in Lake Kivu with Uganda, which will be a consumer of that gas. So is Burundi, so is Tanzania. So this is a diplomatic weapon, and we must exploit it, and it will bring us much closer. Two, I like the young people. This is a resource being found in this generation when we have had best education. East Africa is more educated than it has ever been before, and we have more educated people, young ones, women, and young people to manage this resource for posterity. And so this is an opportunity for the young generation to participate, and they must be ready to do this with all the necessary attendant requirements of ethics, integrity, lack of corruption, transparency, and all the professionalism that is required in this business. The third point is to thank the participants who have played a role in this conversation. But lastly, I want to thank the governments, especially the one of Uganda, and especially His Excellency the President, who has negotiated with Total and been able to attract them to invest in this country at a time like this. Lastly, I want to thank Total, I want to thank UNOC, I want to thank them for having faith as big companies to invest in Uganda and give hope, because they have the resources to manage this work. But particularly, I want to thank Tullow for helping to develop this resource, and to thank them for having also educated me and made me president of their company, and other Ugandans who work for Tullow, like Gilbert over there, making Ugandans be chairman of Tullow, educating, giving scholarships to Ugandans to go and study. And now they are leaving the country, and they are leaving us in very good hands of first-in-class companies. So Tullow, I wish them the best wherever they are. And I'm sure that in time they will come back when they bounce back in the industry. To hell with the prices on stock exchange, to hell with the drop of oil and gas, it will come up again, and we can all be back in the oil industry.
Thank you very much.
I wish all the listeners, and I wish them to know that there is no better place near this place, which is as attractive and as beautiful as Uganda. You are all welcome here. And for my friends in Kenya, you know, you take 60% of the resources through transporting, through the logistics that have to come through Mombasa. So please rest assured, although you didn't get the pipeline, but you have everything. We have to go through Mombasa to come and develop this industry. So you are part and parcel, and you are our partners in development, and we are looking forward to all international companies to come and team up with local content companies and be partners so that we can have a world-class performance in the development of this new province of oil in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Elly. Thank you, NJ. Thank you, Gilbert. Brian, thank you. You've been a fantastic panel. I couldn't have asked for anyone better. I'd also like to thank my wonderful co-host, gosh, I've got a brain freeze here. Katy, sorry. Katy. I'd also like to thank Africa Oil and Power, in particular, Ida, who was very instrumental in making sure that we have a Zoom that doesn't kick off every 40 minutes. And I'd like to also thank the Africa Energy Chamber for really supporting me, and also my team here in Nairobi. I'd like to thank Chantal, Rose, and Alika, who have helped me in the background. It's been wonderful. It's an exciting time for us, and we hope that this is just one of many webinars that we will be hosting. And the role is to educate and to be here to help our brothers and sisters, as well as our international brothers and sisters, in ensuring that we make sure that we produce our resources in a sustainable way. I'd just like to end by saying that as guardians of our vast natural resources, it is upon us to take decisive steps in developing a sustainable energy sector that is anchored by innovation and value-driven addition, and includes a growing focus on renewable sources. The creation of a strong, innovative, and diversified entrepreneurial base of Africans who are fully vested in Africa will be a driving force in achieving greater independence and autonomy of our energy requirements. Together, we can fulfill this mission for the present and the future. Thank you again, everybody, and thank you to the participants. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
I want to make a quick announcement that Liz mentioned she hopes we do more of these webinars. We are doing many of these webinars. We have 2 on Friday, driving African energy investment perspectives on LNG, oil and gas operations and private equity, and the future of Namibian energy industry. Both of those are on Friday. We have several coming up in the next couple of weeks. So just visit africaoilandpower.com/webinars. You'll be able to see the upcoming schedule. And thank you so much to our participants as well. We had over 80 questions, which we were obviously not able to get to them all, but I think that just shows the level of interest and engagement on this topic. So thank you everybody so much, and have a great rest of your day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Elly.
Elly.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.